Welcome back to LoreFactsTV. I'm Ben. Undertale's 10th anniversary was last week, and alongside it came an anniversary stream of the game with a few notable changes. At first, we came into this video with the intention of doing the usual YouTuber thing and covering all the different changes to Undertale that we see in the stream. And while I still think that's worthwhile content, I'm sure that some of the other excellent channels out there have already done so by the time you see this video. But a large driving force behind this script ended up being a handful of specific changes that we felt we had a lot to say on. One which ended up leading to quite the series of answers about our friend Wingding Gaster. So, in this video, we're going to go over a few different bits of the Undertale Anniversary stream and talk about some of the very big implications they have in terms of the lore of Deltarune and Undertale. We do want to give a quick spoiler warning for all of Undertale, Deltarune, and Mother 3. There are quite a few topics I want to discuss here, so I'll start with the briefest rather than going in order of appearance from the stream. I'll link a full compilation of all the new scenes as well as the webpage featuring archives of both streams if you're interested in seeing the content in its intended order, but from here forward, I'll assume that you already have. With that out of the way, in the extension to New Home we see monsters celebrating, having nose-nuzzling tournaments, and spending time together. Most of this is just feel-good fan service content, but the thing I want to highlight here are the balloons and other celebration assets we see. Most of this is very likely reused Deltarune Chapter 5 festival content. We can even see the balloon that we know is from Chapter 5 float by on the screen. There aren't necessarily a ton of lore implications to take from this, so I won't keep going on it, but I feel like it's worth pointing out that this is very likely our first look at a lot of Chapter 5 assets. Another interesting note related to the potential future of Deltarune. There's a scene when returning to the extension of the ruins area, the last real scene of new content we see in the stream. When Toby and the team return to the house with the bookshelves, Gerson is there. He implies it's his house and that he is there to get some of his books before leaving for the surface. He then tells us an extended and somewhat different version of the history of humans and monsters than the one we previously knew. Toby has said this content isn't explicitly canon, so I won't break down what this would potentially mean for the lore of Undertale right now, especially because frankly that could be its own video altogether. But instead, I want to bring up one specific aspect of Gerson's tale in relation to the future Deltarune story revelations. When Gerson tells of the barrier going up, he says that it broke up relationships. This seems to confirm the idea that monsters and humans having cross-species relationships is not an unusual aspect at all in the world of Undertale, and it's very likely this logic would carry over to Deltarune as well unless we are explicitly told otherwise. But why does this matter? There have been a couple theories floating around for a while about the reason we see Susie bleed when breaking the final prophecy, despite Undertale stating that monsters don't bleed. The first option is that not bleeding is a property unique to the Undertale monsters, and that any and all monsters from the Deltarune world do bleed. This would be important because it would then imply that Sans, who is the only monster that bleeds in Undertale, is in fact from the world of Deltarune. But this new implication from Gerson's story seems to add credence to the second theory. Susie bleeds not because all monsters do, but because she is part human. The possibility that one of Susie's parents is human and that's behind her initial weird feelings about Chris now feels like it has much more potential to be true. While nothing is 100% confirmed here, the idea that when writing this new stuff, Toby did not see an issue with doing human and monster relationships does give us an idea into his headspace regarding it, and it definitely makes the human hybrid Susie idea way more likely. Now, I'd like to briefly touch on what I would argue was the entire theme of the anniversary update, that there is more to these worlds than we ever see, and the limits do not stretch to the edges of game data, but rather the edges of our imaginations. The underground is as big as we want it to be, and that goes for any story, I think, not just Undertale. And this stream existed entirely to show us the kind of stuff we could imagine for these stories. As Toby said in the stream, every single monster has to have friends, has to have a place to go eat, and most importantly, every monster has a place to live. That brings us to one of the largest revelations of the anniversary stream, the Gaster door. It happened nearly exactly how some of the fandom had jokingly predicted that it would. The Gaster door appeared in the hallway in Waterfall, and just as the jokes predicted, Toby and the Fangamer team ignored the door completely and just walk on by. However, without even entering the door, we were arguably given one of the most definitive bits of Gaster lore in a very long time. How did that happen? Let's take a closer look at that clip. There's a glaring difference between this door and the one that can appear in Undertale on Fun Value 66. The door in the anniversary stream is very explicitly in color, but what does that tell us exactly? Quite a lot actually, even without going inside. By taking a closer look at the door, we can determine a few factors about it. To begin, the door is a sprite used in other places in both games, such as Sans and Papyrus's house, the Deltarune fast travel door, and Mettaton's hotel. However, what's interesting about this door isn't even the door itself. It's rather a few spare pixels surrounding it. At each of the top corners and under the door as a shadow, we get some spare pixels from the wall and floor wherever the door once was. The original door had these extra pixels as well, so they are by no means an addition, but seeing the door and these pixels in color does let us determine where it comes from almost definitively. As we can see with some comparisons, when monochrome like in the original game, the door could be a match for quite a few different colors. Now with these corner colors and the door color itself determined, it knocks out most of these candidates. It doesn't match the color scheme of the Deltarune fast travel door, and the hotel version of the door has a different shadow and different wall behind it. However, it does match up perfectly with the doors, walls, and floor shadows of Sans and Papyrus's house. This is where things begin to get really interesting. This seems to heavily suggest that the Gaster room actually disappeared from the Sans and Papyrus hallway, and upon seeing this, you may remember this is something we've seen before. There's been a theory going around for a while now that there are actually two Dr. W.D. Gasters across Undertale and Deltarune, one from each respective world. The one we know of now is Dr. W.D. Gaster, Royal Scientist, with his doctor title being scientific in nature. The other Dr. W.D. Gaster, as proposed by this theory, is the one from Deltarune. This Deltarune Gaster is the Forgotten Man, and was somehow erased, replaced, or shattered by the actions of the Undertale Gaster. This Dr. Gaster gets his doctor title from his career as a therapist, likely having an education in psychology rather than science, and he once played the part of Chris's therapist. This theory gained a lot of traction in the wider community when we saw the Chapter 4 Egg Room. In this Egg Room, we go to a place that looks almost exactly like Hometown's hospital. However, in the middle, where a nondescript object hanging on the wall once was, there is now an extra door, a room between. This door depicts an image of the tree, likely an allusion to the Forgotten Man always being behind a tree. The contents of the Egg Room, while we see nothing and is only dialogue, do also suggest that this was some sort of therapist's office or therapy room of the hospital. And that's where we have seen this idea of a missing room before. Time and again, this room between theme has been a major through line in every appearance of the Forgotten Man. In every single Egg Room, the room between aspect has played a major role, peaking in the Chapter 4 Egg Room, where we see a hallway with a newly added door in the middle, and the space where some nondescript stuff hangs on the wall in the middle is actually hiding the forgotten memory of a door that was removed. But is there any evidence that this is really what's happening here in Undertale? There actually is, and this is where the signs really start to come together. This shows us that by all evidence here, not only is the door intended to fit right where the dog bone poster is, but that this may have been set up 10 years ago when Undertale came out. And even in all these years of intense Gaster study by the wider community, this had never even taken hold as an idea. So it makes sense that the small tidbit of Gaster we were given in a mostly Gasterless playthrough of Undertale was Toby heavy-handedly pointing back to something that we missed. This then shifts the entire dynamic of the Forgotten Man and the room between. Rather than an esoteric concept mostly about the Forgotten Man with a vague but suggestible reference to Gaster, it is now centered around Gaster and originating from him. This lends incredible credence to the idea that the Forgotten Man is also W.D. Gaster, just a different one than the one we know now. If this room between concept was something that Toby set up in Undertale that we just missed, that means every time it's happened to Deltarune, it was both a direct reference to Gaster and a hint at this giant missed clue in Undertale. Essentially, Gaster, the room between, and the Forgotten Man now have all drastically shifted in their context and implications, and all of this is thanks to a few colored pixels. It also gives us some more implied Gaster lore. Lots of it we could largely have guessed before, but this gives us much more heavy-handed guidance on what is, or rather was, real about Gaster. He would have lived in the same house as Sans and Papyrus, and this likely means he is related to them as well. Potentially their grandfather, if he is more heavily inspired by Grandpa Semi, father if just a bit older than them, or even a third brother in this trio-turned-duo. It even explains why Sans has the Gaster Blaster as well. The biggest addition for me, though, is a new aspect to the Gaster room I'd never really considered before. Exactly why did this, whatever it is, also happen to his room? Before now, I suppose I had never thought too hard about where exactly you were when you were in the Gaster room. Some space outside of time, weird extra-dimensional plane. Whatever the case, in my head I had just sort of tucked that away as not even being part of the equation. But now, knowing that this door and room come from somewhere and aren't just some magical apparition, it definitely shifts how I feel about quite a few Gaster-related things. If this room is real, and too was shattered across space-time like Gaster, or is at least somewhat Gonerified, this changes the implications about where exactly it was Gaster was shattered. There are a few major interpretations of what could have happened to Gaster, and I think this forces all of them to take a major reflective look. Some people believe that Gaster falling into his creation was him falling into the core, shattering across time and space. Others, including me, believe that his creation mentioned here was not the core, despite the prior conversation being about him making the core. This vague wording was to hide that Gaster had fallen into a different creation of his own, a dark fountain, whose creation is depicted in Entry 17. And now, reevaluating Entry 17 with this new context from the revelations about Gaster's room, it allows us to seemingly paint a pretty vivid picture of what was going on here now. It seems as though Gaster created the dark fountain, potentially the first dark fountain, in his room here in the skeleton household. This explains exactly what Gaster is talking about in Entry 17 and who the U2 mentioned are. For years, people have largely suspected it was either Sans and Papyrus or Sans and Alphys, and with the context of knowing where it almost certainly takes place, knowing that this dark fountain had to be in his room, we can pretty easily determine that it might be Papyrus and Sans. I would argue that it seems, judging by the shapes of these rooms and the way the sprites fit together even without the new color additions, this was always meant to be the case. The room has always gone here and not in Waterfall, and this was meant to be something we took from Undertale that we always missed up until now. This also has very large implications for the current fate of Gaster as well. As we discussed before, the room between now being very explicitly Gaster coded seems to suggest that the idea of the Forgotten Man is actually a different WD Gaster, native to the world of Deltarune and somehow replaced or erased by the Undertale Gaster. With this in mind and knowing what happened to our Gaster, I think we can surmise quite a few things about what happened and the relationship between the two. First off, Gaster making the fountain in his bedroom rather than in the core or his lab does exemplify this continuing theme of problematic escapism in Deltarune. It's a common trope, running to your room to escape into your chosen method of doing so, whether that be music, a movie, or a book. For Gaster, however, it seems to be this other world. While creating or discovering the alternate world of Deltarune via this dark fountain in his room, he created his own obsession, his own escapism. He fell into his creation is not saying he literally fell into the core, rather he fell into, as in becoming obsessed with, his creation, his story. In his obsession with this other world, it seems that Gaster became interested in creating a perfect world of his own design, his Deltarune. He would spend more and more time with this world, and less time in his own. Perhaps he planned to somehow steal or create a soul at first. The plan started as some way to still fulfill his ultimate goal of breaking down the barrier. But then, either through failure to create a soul, or simply a world without the barrier altogether just being more interesting to him, Gaster eventually loses sight of anything outside the world of Deltarune. This is when something unexpected happened though. What specifically happens at this point, we can't exactly say, but because we have figured out so much of the before and so much of the after, we can piece together events that would need to take place for the story to play out as it has. Gaster, experimenting with this unique dark world inside his room in Sans' house, somehow triggers an event we have yet to see within a dark world. Perhaps some equivalent of a roaring, or perhaps the dark fountain somehow imploded on itself, existed too long, or grew too powerful. Whatever the case may be, he and his entire room which contained the fountain are ripped out of space and time, shattering and leaving him in pieces, most people forgetting him entirely. At this point, either by accident or by his own design, Gaster has now entered the world of Deltarune in some way. Whether he exists literally within the bunker or at some level above the world in order to use the device on it, Gaster disappearing from Undertale has now put him in a position to directly interact with Deltarune, at the cost of forever disappearing from his homeworld. Around this time, perhaps as a consequence of the shattering of Undertale Gaster arriving in this world, or perhaps intentionally by the hand of Gaster to prevent him from interfering, the Deltarune and Therapist Gaster is also erased from his world. However, this Gaster, when he shatters across space and time, instead becomes the Forgotten Man. From here, with his other self out of the way, Gaster begins to interact with and change the world of Deltarune as he sees fit, creating his Deltarune. With this context in mind, we can actually make a pretty accurate guess as to what the Forgotten Man's goal actually is, what the eggs are, and why Gaster considers them an issue. Let's start with quickly explaining why we know the eggs are an issue for Gaster, in case any viewers don't know. With the Chapter 3 and 4 release of Deltarune, we also got achievements for the game. And these achievements are written and formatted in such a way that it's very obviously Gaster who wrote them. They are just as much part of the story as the dialogue in and around the menus. There is one specific achievement present in each chapter that simply requires you to beat the current chapter without issue. And this achievement is basically always unlocked for you. Even doing the weird route does not present an issue, and keeps you from getting this achievement. The only way to not get this achievement is to find the Forgotten Man and retrieve an egg from him. So, if these eggs are somehow related to the Forgotten Man, who we now believe to be the Therapist Gaster from the Deltarune world, and also a present issue for the Undertale Gaster who is currently controlling the world to some extent, what exactly are they? I think the key lies in Chapter 3's Egg Room, Man Country. To find Man Country, you have to go on quite the journey in Chapter 3. It starts with some setup finding a Lancer controller and throwing a block to a specific spot in a regular puzzle. Then you get caught by the spotlight and tell the zapper who shows up that you're a cheater and that you're headed nowhere. Immediately after being transported to a new room by the zapper, head right to find a game console puzzle. Push the same block that was thrown across the river in the different puzzle earlier onto the switch to solve it. Head right from the freshly solved puzzle to find a Bibliox using a game console. Use the game console next to him and talk to his character in game until you get the trip ticket added to your inventory. Finally, backtrack and enter a battle with a Ribic. Navigate to the Act menu with Chris and place the menu cursor on Croak on X. Instead of selecting it, hold left to have the cursor walk off screen and escape the fight. From here, you arrive in Man Country, specifically the Forgotten Island. You get to have your longest chat yet with the Forgotten Man, and he says, "Will you forget me too?" When we tell him no, he tells us a story. Once upon a time, the whole world looked like this. Do you really think so? Really? You believe something so absurd? I'm happy to hear it. Let me continue. Well, the world changed. Society was developed. The earth was covered in water. Dinosaurs appeared. An ice age. Actually, there are still dinosaurs. Is it mixed up? In any case, this island is the only place left I can talk. Do you understand what I'm saying? Funny, I haven't the faintest clue what it all means. But one day, this island will disappear too. We may not meet again in that case. Did you want to meet again? Oh joy. Chris receives the egg. You may forget me, I may forget myself, but I will remember your kindness. Now, this island will disappear soon. You must depart. If you will it, we shall meet again at that place. Whether 11 hours or 11 years, Deltarune will be waiting. So take your time, wash your face, and get dressed. The story seems very surreal and hard to comprehend, but if we take this in the context of what we've now established about both Gasters, and take a look to some of Toby's biggest inspirations, we can find the answer to the eggs that we're looking for. Mother 3 is a 7-chapter RPG released by Nintendo and HAL Laboratory for the Game Boy Advance in 2006 as a Japan-exclusive title. The game is about a young boy named Lucas and his family and friends as they navigate a remote chain of islands where they live called the Nowhere Islands from his home in Tasmili Village. Lucas and his friends attempt to fight off an invasion of creatures known as the Pig Masks. This ultimately results in a long adventure that we will mostly skim over for the sake of time except for highlighting one specific set of plot beats. Interactions with the light egg, a very unique item that appears or is mentioned multiple times in the game. Deep in the dusty halls of Osohe Castle, a creepy old ruin north of Tasmili Village, the light egg first shows up in Mother 3's Chapter 2. Duster, a scrappy thief, gets sent by his dad Wes to grab this glowing egg-shaped orb before the Pigmask army can get their hands on it. With Princess Kumatora in tow, they dodge ghosts and traps to find it tucked away in a secret room shining like magic. They grab it, but things go south fast. During a clash with the Pigmasks, the egg slips away, swept off in a river's current, leaving everyone wondering what made it so special. But the egg doesn't stay gone. In Chapter 3, as the Pigmasks tear through Tasmili Village, you hear whispers about their hunt for it. They're grilling folks like poor Salsa the monkey, acting like this lost orb holds some kind of power. It's not in your hands yet, but the buzz around it grows, hinting that it's tied to something bigger than we know. Pigmask's obsession makes it clear. Whatever the light egg is, it's worth chasing across the Nowhere Islands. By Chapter 5, the egg's shadow looms again at Thunder Tower, a Pigmask base in Murasaki Forest. Duster, now a bit lost himself with amnesia and jamming with the band DCMC, gets a faint spark of memory when the egg's mentioned, like it's calling to him. The Pigmasks haven't given up their search yet either, and you start to feel the eggs pulling the strings behind the scenes, tying the story together in ways you can't quite see yet. Lucas and his crew, with Duster still foggy on his past, dig through a junk pile and find the egg hidden inside a busted clay golem. When Duster touches it, flashes of his old life hit him, like the egg's trying to whisper secrets it's been holding on to. It's a quiet moment, but it screams importance, hinting that this glowing orb knows more about everyone than they know about themselves. The truth finally cracks open in New Pork City, when Leader, the silent bell ringer of Tasmili Village, spills everything. Long ago, there existed a world different from what the people of these islands think of. This world was incredibly big. More people lived on this world than there are grains of sands on these Nowhere Islands. At some point, the world was destroyed. Naturally, it was us humans who destroyed it. Everyone had an inkling that it would happen at some point, and then it really did happen. And so, the world is no more. Before the end of the world, a white ship came to these islands. On it were the people of Tasmili, a Aboard the white ship were those few who had managed to escape the world. These people still went by their previous names. This white ship plan had been set in place before the world was destroyed. And, although they're part of this world, these Nowhere Islands are a special place. They were the one place that would remain, even if the world was lost. The one and only place where people could survive. And so the white ship arrived at these islands. These islands are special because they harbor a dragon as big as the islands themselves. Long, long ago, people lived together with the dragon. But at some point in time, they could no longer coexist. So, using the 7 needles, the dragon was placed into a long, long sleep by the ancestors of the Magypsy people. Ever since, the Magypsies have guarded the needles to prevent the dragon from waking until its power is truly needed. Thus, until the time of its awakening, the dragon continued to sleep as the power of the earth itself. So, because of the tremendous energy of the dragon deep below, these islands were protected from the end of the world. Those aboard the white ship feared another end of the world more than anything else. They felt that the world's destruction was a direct result of the way they had lived. The people of the white ship discussed things at great length. They shared their wisdom and spoke with grave seriousness, and then they arrived at their conclusion. They decided to erase everyone's memories of the previous world and start their lives over with new rules and roles. In short, everyone would play out the ideal story that they had come up with. That is what happened. The people would restart their lives in a simple, peaceful village, in the kind of place they wished they had grown up in. They would erase memories of everything, the world, their belongings, their rules, and then begin their new lives. Everyone's old memories would be reset and replaced with the new story, and thus the village of Tazmily came to be. However, it was necessary to record the fact that the memory replacement had taken place. The egg was the device used to store memories of the white ship people. Wes and his son Duster, both playing thieves, were to take action should a dangerous situation occur. Remember when they went to Osohe Castle? They went there to retrieve the secret of the people of the white ship. There was one other thing, me. It was essential for someone to retain memory of the previous world and keep watch. I was the only one in Tazmily who wasn't given a role in the new story. The sound of my bell served as a suggestion to keep everyone's fabricated memories from reverting. My name, Leader, comes from leader. No, that doesn't mean I was anyone special. I was just taller than the others. I was selected because it would be easier for me to stand out. Being so tall, people would want to come see me, and so I was given the role of revealing these secrets when the time truly called for it. Now, about Osohe Castle. Apparently, a kingdom once existed on this island, centered around the king of Osohe. But when we arrived, its people were gone. It seems they had left, fearing the dragon's eventual awakening. Before boarding the white ship, Princess Kumatora was an infant who had lost her mother and father. Upon coming to these islands, she was given to the Magypsies to raise, and given the role of Princess of Osohe Castle. Wes and Duster being her retainers was another part of the fabricated story. We had no idea how Tazmily Village would turn out, but things actually went rather well. The white ship people had fully taken to their new identities. They believed they had always lived together peacefully. It was when a person by the name of Porky stumbled upon these islands that everything started to go amok. It seems he used a time distorter machine to travel through time and space at will. However, he was apparently shut out from all other times and spaces and tumbled into this era and these islands. Even worse, he used his time distorter to bring many people from other eras here. The pig masks, as well as everyone in New Pork City, were all brought here and brainwashed by Porky. Porky seems to view these islands as his toy box, with which he can do anything he wants. He took animals apart and recombined them to make creepy new chimeras. As a childlike dictator, he did as he pleased, including building Thunder Tower and forming his own army. Porky eventually learned the white ship's secret because of a traitor amongst the Magypsies. This traitor was Locria, the 7th Magypsy and the one you haven't met yet. After Locria joined forces with Porky, Porky learned about the white ship people and the sleeping dragon. Porky decided to pull the needles to wake the dragon so he could use the power for himself. The dragon is the power of the earth. It's said that whoever pulls the sealing needles will be the dragon's master. Only a select few can pull the needles. Neither the Magypsies nor Porky have that capability. Yet, the needles are being pulled now. That means Porky is controlling someone who can control the dragon's power. We have to put a stop to Porky's antics. If we don't, it will spell the true end for everything in this time. For Porky, that might be the ultimate pleasure, but we can't allow it to happen. We, the last handful of people there are, absolutely can't allow it to happen. Lucas, you're a chosen one with the ability to pull the needles sealing the dragon away. You must pull the dark dragon's needle with your own hands and pass your heart on to the dragon. Let this be my one and only order to you as your leader. And here is where I think our connection lies. The egg contains memories of the old world, now gone and removed so that the people could live out their lives as a story that they created. I believe Deltarune's eggs are likely close to the same thing. These eggs are a problem for the Undertale Gaster because they contain memories from before he changed this world to his liking that would ruin his story. The only question becomes, memories of what exactly? There are two potential options, and I think they largely depend on the chronological relationship between Undertale and Deltarune. Option 1 is memories of Undertale, or memories from their alternate Undertale selves. The idea being that the eggs, if somehow used on someone who had an alternate in Undertale like Asgore, Toriel, or Undyne, would give them the memories of their Undertale equivalent as well. This I consider the less likely option, but it would be more in line with how the egg worked in Mother 3. Option 2, and the more likely one in my opinion, is that these eggs contain memories of the world before the Deltarune Gaster was removed from it, and likely before whatever other changes the Undertale Gaster made as well. This is a far more potent idea because it relies less on Undertale being a prequel or having already taken place, and also gives far more story potential going forward. The entire game so far has been thematically circling the drain on breaking prophecy, changing fate, obsession with stories, and escapism. What better way for that all to culminate than to turn on the very storyteller himself? In the same way Leader was the last man to remember the old world, both Gasters serve very much the same role here. However, Undertale Gaster's obsession with the Deltarune world, his weakness to escapism, has caused him to interfere with these people's lives and change things around to create his Deltarune, his perfect story. And with the help of Deltarune Gaster, the only other man with access to the memories, giving us the eggs that contain these memories, we can help those inside the story realize they are being manipulated and change the very story itself, change fate. This, I believe, suggests that the Forgotten Man and the eggs will ultimately be the key to breaking the prophecy and likely the long-awaited Gaster confrontation, and eventually, we'll be seeing the identity of the Forgotten Man also being Gaster, just not the Gaster we're expecting to meet. But I think we've gone quite far from that little brown door in the anniversary stream, huh? Let's leave it here for now. Thanks for watching another LoreFactsTV video, and stay tuned for the finale video in our Gaster series coming very soon. See you next time.